am Claire, your orbit driver.
I am Carly, your passenger.
I got to say, I was a huge fan of this when it came out on Quibi. So I am so delighted that it's coming back as a feature film. And I remember you talked before about how it was a challenge. It was a fascinating challenge as a writer to figure out how to tweak this story to fit the Quibi model. But now that it's a feature film, what was it like for you going back and sort of reverse engineering your original reverse engineering?
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, I had purposely designed it to be cut at some point if I was so lucky to get the copyright back as a feature. So it was designed with some smoothing kind of between the big kind of, oh my God moments coming out of each 10-minute episode so that it wouldn't feel artificial in the feature form. But I think the biggest pleasure and change, other than an artist being able to own their work, which, oh my God, right, is so like unheard of, especially in the TV space, was being able to just say, okay, I don't need to be married to this notion of vertical anymore, as a director, which was fascinating. I mean, it was really fun to play, and it kind of gave me another tool in my toolbox. But I love the idea, of now being able to see left to right, see horizontal, see landscape, especially since it's LA and the locations are like a fourth character, in the film, to be able to see every like nook and cranny, of that Chinatown Plaza, or being on the Amtrak or, everywhere we went, we were able to really kind of see the space. Which was so satisfying.
I love that. And I mean, it does, even though the vertical could give the claustrophobic feel, that wider does add to the sort of claustrophobia that Micah's character is going through in this movie show. I don't know what to call it anymore.
No one does. I mean, I think it's kind of cool. I was just talking to someone the other day that it feels like we're in, I mean, I know things are happening and craziness is happening and people are scared and everything posts, a very justified strike. But I think that, it's, we are on the verge of this really interesting, and I hope we get to play it out. And maybe as the creators, we are the ones who have to kind of push as hard as we can. But just like the whole world's IQ, I mean, American certainly has like skyrocketed because of this amazing, golden age of television. I mean, we're watching Korean films, we're watching Korean soap operas in the original language, which was unheard of, like 8 years ago. And we're hungry, we're hungry for more different, novel, other ways of thinking about the art form and being able to say, okay, how do you, how does TV then become film and film become TV? And why is it separation of church and state, Behind the scenes, we know it isn't, but in front, it seems like we're so kind of like you need a pass to kind of go through the two worlds, and creatively, like, yeah, how do we marry it? And that is what I loved about the Quibi model is Jeffrey did say, let's think about things differently, purposefully.
There was a lot of great intention behind that platform. So part of me does definitely miss it. Even if I did want widescreen versus vertical, part of me definitely misses a lot of the great content that came there. And I hope that, more people like you can follow in your footsteps and take ownership and get it somewhere else. And that actually brings me to my next question was, what was it like looking for the next, for the new home for this? After getting, the rights back to it? I
felt like I was an indie filmmaker. I was like, okay, what do we do now? And no one's going to help me or tell me what to do, and no one, even though Fox, now Disney, owns 50% of the copyright, again, because it's TV, but they can't put it on TV and it's not a movie, all the stuff. No one knew, like literally no one knew. And so I had to go to my indie friends and say, what is four-walling? What about festivals? What about this? What about, and so we started, so the great kind of indie film world was able to kind of school me, which was amazing. And at the same time, we still have these outlets, Hulu, I mean, Disney now feeds Hulu. So then that became the next part chapter 3, chapter 4, after Quibi, after Roku, after the film festivals. Now here's another place.
I love that. And I mean, this movie is such a perfect one for film festivals. It seems like something that so many would eat up. So I'm glad that you've had this journey thus far. So looking back on the whole process, then I remember at one point you were talking about maybe this could go in an anthological route if this title were to continue. Have you had any further thoughts now that you have, taken the rights back and recut it as a feature?
Thank you for reminding me about that. I don't even remember that. I did. The great container of Quibi, was very much going to be like, okay, what comes next? After The Stranger, how do I, anthologize it and make something? And it would be in a completely different world of zombies, actually, was what I wanted to play in, because I've never played in the horror genre. But yeah, thank you for the reminder. I think that stripping away kind of the novelty of how do we make this a vertical show, a 10-minute vertical show, then puts, in some ways, my head as a filmmaker and creator, TV creator, back in the space of more conventional things. But I think the reminder, of Quibi introduced an idea, at least for me as a creator, and how can I continue down that road? Maybe that will be the next thing. Thanks, Grant.
You're welcome. That's very fun. I'd love to see zombies in this world. And so with anthologies, though, sometimes creatives bring back original actors. Sometimes they just go with a new cast. And I mean, Micah and Dane are just fantastic in everything they're in. And so would you be open to having them come back? Obviously we know Dane's character can't come back, but would you be open to, him coming back as a new character, or Micah being someone new or reprising her role? Yeah,
I love that idea of being able to, take these amazing actors, Micah and Dane and Evan, and just being like, okay, now let's mix it up. And you guys are in this whole other universe playing these different roles, riffing off of the notion of a stranger and putting it in a different genre. So if it were in the zombie genre, could Dane come back as a zombie who got killed by the wolves and then the mad scientist? Who knows? But I do like, it was such a pleasure working with all of them. And Dane was so much, that last scene where he gets ripped apart by the wolves was just hilarious, fun, dark, all the things. So somehow being able to go back to the wolves and Dane and some horrible version of kind of what they did to him somehow is, especially with the election coming up in 2024, any sort of toxic masculinity getting ripped apart is probably going to be very welcome for me, at least.
No, I love it. And and you're right. And so this movie is coming at the perfect time or coming back, I should say, at the perfect time to sort of remind audiences of that. And so, did you have that? Because obviously we had a president at the time who was displaying a lot of elements of toxic masculinity amongst many other things. Did you have that sort of in mind, that social relevancy when writing this in the first place?
100%. Because I think around the time that I started to think about it, we were right in kind of the heart of Me Too and toxic masculinity and taking it down, and so this was one kind of weapon in that war, at least in my mind. And I wanted to talk about it, and I wanted us to win. And so, instead of kind of the trope of, oh my God, I die at the end, and I jump off a cliff, the brave woman is fucked over at the end. I wanted the fucking monster to get fucked over in the end. And he was. And he will be in 2024. Who knows?
And yeah, the monster definitely lost in The Stranger, and I'm glad he did. And so with Dane, he's played villains before, but did you ever have to sort of help, I don't want to say push per se, but nudge him to go even further at times with this already dark character? No,
Dane is, he works from such well-honed instinct. It never goes broad, ever. And that's what I love. I love so much about working with him. It was, he understood the character. We had conversations beforehand. We did some, talking and some reading between him and Micah beforehand. And he's deeply intelligent. He's deeply instinctual. I never had to push anything. I mean, I think the only time we talked a little bit about on the final scene, the big kind of final scene between him and Micah. We talked about layering in some vulnerability, because he is vulnerable. For the very first time, he is not holding the cards, and he has to be really smart in manipulating this person. But when he sees that she's not, he can't use contempt, he can't use bossiness, he can't use, masculine kind of entitlement to make her help him and not do what she's gone there to do. All of a sudden, there is that moment where he's like, help me up. And you see that fear in his face, And so to talk through that and to see him just go there so quickly, he can go from super dark to super vulnerable, like in a nanosecond.
And that's why he was the best actor for this role. I mean, truly. And Micah, she's the same ability. She can go from vulnerable to a badass like that. And
right.
that ending shows it more than anything.
Yeah.
I think I'm almost out of time. So before I let you go, obviously we talked about more of The Stranger, but I'd love to hear what else you have coming up on your docket after this.
Well, I have a classic television show coming up for Amazon, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, another angry woman out to get the bad guys and the monsters. So I'm really excited about that. Bringing it to television, after 15, 20 years, it's been kind of in the stratosphere. And there's so much to talk about today that was relevant back then when Stieg Larsson first published the books, the trilogy. About female rage, about abuse, about, the emergence of racism, white nationalism, all of the things. 20 years later, here we are, So it's super relevant to today. And that's, so far, just pursuing kind of the outlier women has always been the thing I love. So I'm really excited about it.
I'm really excited to hear more about that. And so, I mean, there's been multiple adaptations of that book, of that franchise thus far. And I mean, I love David Fincher's version. I love Noomi Rapace's versions as well. What are you how are you looking to approach this differently than maybe those versions tackled?
Well, it's a little bit under wraps right now, so I can't reveal too much. Other than to say, welcome to female rage. It's like strong, it's powerful, and it's going to take some shit down in the next few years. So I'm excited that we get to see again, a new version of a woman who just refuses to follow the rules. That's
amazing. Well, I'm going to keep my eye out for that, because I do love that property, and I love Lisbeth. She's just such a great character. So I'm excited to see what you do with her. And that is all the questions I really had. So Veena, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an absolute treat, and I really look forward to people getting to dive into The Stranger.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your week.